In this video, I'm going to create a new block which is going to check to see if the input is a valid number. So we are going to go and see if we can create one block which is going to return either true or false depending on even if a number is valid or not. So let's create a new block, let's call it create valid number block. We are not going to just change the category as usual and not changing the public. Now, what we are going to do is that we are going to have a row with a text box and also the button, and at the bottom we're going to have a label which is going to show us if the number entered is valid or false. So to do that one, we are going to go to layout and we are going to go and drag and drop the row here. Again, the row, the height is too much, so we are going to change it to fit contents. Now again, we are going to go to user interface and drag and drop a button, drag and drop a text box, and drag and drop a label. Now, from now on, I'm going to change the format of naming the blocks. The first thing is the label. I'm going to change it to MSG message underscore LBL, meaning it's a label. Now the label has to be underneath row, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to drag and drop it under the row, so it's going to stay here. Now let's change the font. Let's change it to 25. Let's make the color to be something like red color. Let's change the font weight to be bold, and let's change the width to be the container, and also let's change the text alignment to be centered. So this is about our label. Now we have to put the text box and the button inside the row. To do that one, I'm going to go and drag and drop the text input one inside the row. So it goes inside the row. Now I'm going to drag and drop the button inside the row. The button has to be on the other side, so I'm going to go and move it to the right. Now the button, I'm going to change the text on the button to submit, and let's leave the hint to type a valid number. So this is our design here. Now let's go ahead and create a block which checks to see if the input here is a number. So we're going to go to blocks. Remember to create a new block. We click on functions and we have two options, this one or this one. This one doesn't return anything, so I'm not going to use this one, but I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to call it valid number. This one returns either true if the number is valid. How are we going to check if the number is valid? Is very, very simple. If we go to math, one of the operation here is the absolute value of a number. If you don't really know what absolute value does, the absolute value of a number gets the number throws away the sign and returns the number without the sign. So for instance, absolute value of negative 9 returns 9. Absolute value of 9 also returns 9. Now the nice thing about this operator is that if the input is not a valid number, it returns not a number. In case of thunkable, it returns NaN, nan. So this is a good block to use to check to see if the number is valid. So what you are going to do is that you are going to check to see if this one, absolute negative 9, is going to return a valid number. If it's a valid number, then because the absolute value returns the number without the sign, the number has to be greater than or equal to 0, obviously. So I need logic, and I'm going to bring this one back here, put this one here, change this one to greater than or equal to, and then here I'm going to have a math 0. Now this value negative 9 really is the input to this function, so I have to create an input here. So I click on this one, I add it here, then I'm going to change the name to number. Just close it. So this one has to be the number. So I'm going to variables, and then I click and return numbers here. So if the input number, the absolute value, is greater than or equal to 0, then it means it's a valid number. Otherwise, it's invalid number. Now we are going to use this block to see if the input is valid. So I'm going to click on button 1. This is when the user enters number and click submit. So I'm going to check to see if the number which is input is valid. And then I'm going to assign the return value from this one in my label. So here, for message label, I'm going to set the message, which is the text here, and I'm going to set it to the return value here. So I'm going to go to functions, and I'm going to say valid number with number. So the number, remember, is coming from the text input 1. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to get text input 1 and put it here. So the user enters a number in text input 1 and clicks submit. The submit button is going to change the text of the label to whatever which is returned from this block. And this block, when it gets this value, is going to find the absolute value of the number. If the absolute value is greater than or equal to 0, then it's a valid number. If it is not, then it's going to return false. So let's go and test it. If I type, let's say, 12, it returns true, which is correct, because 12 is a valid number. If I type negative 9, it returns true, which is correct. If I type negative space 9, obviously this has to return false, because this is not a valid number because of the space. You can see it's a false. If I type, let's say, 09, still it's a valid number because 09 is 9, which is true. If I type negative plus 2, this is invalid. It returns false. Now, I told you about the keyboard. If I click edit, you may be tempted to say, oh, why not changing it to numeric so it's only valid numbers can be typed here? Just watch. If I type 1 is okay, but I can also type characters here. So this really doesn't work. If I click it, it says false, because AS are not valid number. But there is a small problem here. If I type just space here, it returns true, which is false because space, it's not a valid number. So somehow we have to fix this problem. To do that one, it's very simple fix here. When I receive the number here, I just make sure that I take care of all the spaces before and after the number. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a new variable and I'm going to call it number without spaces. Okay, and I'm going to assign the value 0 to it. Doesn't matter what we assign. Then here I'm going to go to variables and I'm going to set number without spaces to trim the number, the spaces before and after the number. So go to text and then I'm going to find this block which says trim spaces from both sides of ABC. ABC is the number, so I need to get the number. So I'm going to get the number, duplicate, and put it here. So this one is going to give me the input without the spaces. Now, if I put all spaces, then if I take the spaces out, the length of number without spaces is going to be 0. So I can put this condition along with this one. So I'm going to take this one out and I'm going to bring AND operator. I'm going to put this one here and I'm going to have another condition that length of number without spaces has to be greater than 0. So I'm going to go to text and then I'm going to say length logic. I'm going to bring this one down, put this one here, and I want this one to be greater than 0. So I'm going to take the 0 here, put it here, and this text is going to be number without spaces. So I'm going to duplicate this one, put it here, and change this one to number without spaces. And put this one here, then I can just external inputs. And you can see now the return is that first of all, the absolute number has to be, absolute value of the number has to be greater than or equal to 0. And also the length of the number without the spaces has to be greater than 0. So if I go and check it now and go to preview, if I have only spaces, it returns false. If I have space 1, it returns true, which is correct. If I have, let's say, spaces and -1, it's going to return true. If I have negative spaces 0, it returns false. So this block that we wrote here, this one, is one of the most important blocks that you will need later on when you write your apps. You cannot depend on the user to enter valid numbers. This one takes care of that.